Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talk with Coach. I'm your host, Becca Goldsberry, elite sales and leadership coach with Southwestern Consulting. This podcast is all about learning from the best in the business, those who have walked the walk and are ready to share their journeys, their lessons, and hard earned wisdom. We are about to discover some invaluable tips today that can help transform your business or leadership journey. So buckle up and get ready for another episode with Talk with Coach. Today, I am very excited to have our guest on, Joe Gervais, and he is a friend that we have had other episode guests come on because of Miss Sherry Sullivan. And so I can't wait for him to share his expertise with you guys. Joe established whydignify.com and became a franchise owner in Goosehead Insurance after representing two manufacturers with distribution to civic and educational organizations throughout the US and Canada. He has had the privilege of working with a variety of roles with an intentional focus on providing high quality, unique experiences where customer satisfaction has served as the foundation for success. Originally from Buffalo, New York, go Bills. We're going to have to talk about this one. But anyways, I digress. Joe is passionate about spending time with his family, the outdoors, bowling, and traveling. He is engaged through the community, through a lot of different organizations, including Metro Indianapolis Board of Realtors, Indiana Mortgage Bankers Association, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, the United Way, and Aspire Johnson County. When consulting with clients, his priority is providing coverage to secure home loans and properly protect their assets while safeguarding the future for themselves and their loved ones. Joe, I'm so glad you're on. Welcome to Talk with Coach.
Thanks, Coach. Good to be
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. Well, because when you and I connected and talked, um, I found your story so interesting in how you got to Goosehead. I would love for you just to share a glimpse of how you went from, selling educational, through that medium from schools to schools and different things to where you are with Goosehead. Could you share a little bit of your story?
Sure. So I think, overall insurance is something that impacts most people's lives. And, whether they're aware of it or not, I was very aware, throughout my childhood and into adulthood of um, the purpose of insurance, mainly through experience, right? The loss of a loved one, accidents that had happened, just different things that it sort of became a theme. When I was 19, I was at a gas station, struck up a conversation with somebody, and this guy gives me his business card and goes, "Have you ever thought about selling insurance?" And I was at the time, it was like, no, why would I do that? I'm in college. I don't have any, intentions of doing that. But um, for that reason, among others, it kind of always stayed with me. So about 10 years later, I've got two kids and realizing, gosh, if something happened to me, having life insurance would be important. And it came back again and it was like, everyone should know this. So that kind of started me in between a job transition, thinking about it. I had interviewed and gotten approved with one organization to open an agency, but decided against it. Just the timing didn't feel right. And so post COVID, selling tangible goods, you had so many different things. People weren't gathering indoors. You had the supply chain issues. And ultimately, I decided, this was an opportunity for me to have a role in the local community to, take some of those things that I'd carried with me throughout the years and, instill those values in others. So that's how I ended up here. What I love about Goosehead is they have a national footprint. So I've lived in 5 different states. I've worked for several sales organizations with a national footprint. And so this gave me an opportunity to leverage a company that had a product throughout the United States and a presence with the franchise organization that I could take care of people wherever they were. So that is what I love about Goosehead, among the many things. So,
I love that. Joe, all right. What was the moment in your career where everything looked stable on the outside, but internally you knew something just needed to change?
well, I would go back. So I had the position that I thought, okay, I could do this for the rest of my career. I was traveling a couple nights a week. I made my own schedule. I could be home with my family when I needed to. I was working from home long before COVID was even a thought. And about 3 years in, I was having success. I was feeling really, proud of the work I was doing, working with superintendents and other decision makers across the country to update their school environments, working with other high caliber individuals from furniture manufacturers to dealer and distributor organizations. And something still felt like it was missing. So, I was a sociology major. Community is really important to me. Family is really important to me, and making a difference in the lives of people. So at that time, my way of addressing it was to become a school board member with a local school in Indianapolis. I joined on and quickly became the treasurer and then later the chair for a few years. And then when IPS redistricted and kind of changed things up, that school went back into their portfolio. And it was the same year that I started my business. So the timing of what I described from when I started my business also coincided with that sort of internal need or that desire to impact the lives of others. So it sort of segued in a sense to that role.
Okay. So I know you do a lot of networking, and some of the organizations that um, you mentioned, one of them I am a part. I've been a part of. As a speaker multiple times, which it was the Indiana Mortgage Bankers Association. And then, of course, part of Aspire Johnson County. So, what is it about networking? Because that is such a big part of your business, what you do, and I know you do a lot with Alignable. So, I would love to, how did you get involved in networking the way you do now?
Well, it started, one from the sense of that I knew these organizations existed, right? Chambers of Commerce,
Right.
different lunch and learn type opportunities. So I started out with a Chamber of Commerce that was doing a lot of different events, and that's in Mooresville. The cost was reasonable. They have something just about every week. It's a smaller community, but a larger chamber. So there's quite a bit of engagement and people truly care about each other. That's the foundation of it. They want to learn from each other and create relationships that make a lasting difference. So everyone's there because they want to build their business, they want to grow their business, expand their business, keep their business alive, but at the same time, that in and of itself doesn't sustain the type of activity that's necessary to really thrive. And so those connections, keep you going on a day when you could be in your office and you're lonely and you're worried and you have all these things that you're trying to figure out. And just getting out there and showing up, and you meet someone that happens to fill a need that you were currently contending with. Maybe you needed some help with some accounting or you had a legal question. You run into someone who's either been there or has that expertise. So that's really the magic of it. And I just kept going. What else is out there? There's so many organizations. And what I found is that, the part of me that really is drawn to doing good in the world also connected well with other nonprofit organizations that are out there doing the same thing. They're building awareness, they're doing that development work. And you don't really know how you can serve each other when you first meet, but over time, something will happen where it's like, oh, I have this opportunity, and if I bring this person with me, they can also benefit from it. So that's really what I've enjoyed. And you have to pick your priorities, carefully, because time is such an instrumental piece of everyone's lives. But that's, ultimately how I've ended up where I have. And I just find that it's a natural gift or inclination of mine to make connections and to help other people.
No, I love that. I often get the question of, Becca, is networking really worth it? Because every time I go networking, it just feels salesy and cheesy. And I just feel like I'm passing around my business card, right? So, my question for you, Joe, is what do you see as the difference between networking and then real relationship building? And can you do that networking?
I think it's an interesting concept, and it probably means something different for everyone. That just showing up authentically and being receptive to the other people in the room and understanding their situation, their personality, their business or organization, um, and then showing up again. And the third or fourth or sixth or 10th time you meet someone, it might click. Um, all of a sudden, after about a year of being part of a group, there was someone in the group that did dog training. And I have a couple dogs. They've been through training from a different business. And then one day, they said, well, my organization's looking to grow on the north side. And I was on Alignable, doing things that I normally would do. But all of a sudden noticed there's 3 or 4 people on the north side, all different types of pet businesses. And I just was like, I'm going to make a quick note to them and say, hey, I have somebody who does dog training. This is what I think might be of use to you. Are you interested in an introduction? And it was timing. So, I like this person. They're, great to have in a group. I think that they do excellent work. And I just didn't have an opportunity to add value for them until that moment. And then all of a sudden, I made 4 or 5 introductions, and that person was like, you're amazing. Thank you so much. I can't believe you did this. And then it just kept going. It was like, well, why don't I introduce them to my vet? Why don't I introduce them? And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's just, we only have so much bandwidth. It's just
Mhm.
timing and it's intention and, the connection. Why that person? Why not the plumber in the group or whatever the other options would have been. Uh, and it just, came about naturally. And it was because I showed up week after week in this group, and so did they. So that's just one example.
Yep.
Definitely think there's value in practicing your elevator pitch. I think there's value in passing out business cards because it's all about awareness. You want people to know you exist. Whether you do email campaigns or one-on-ones or whatever the strategy, the follow-up is from there, it's going to be a very individual thing to figure out what works.
So in what was that? May or June when Aspire did their first speed networking event, I think I had 17, 18 coffees scheduled from that speed networking event. And there happened to be a few ladies that I really connected with as well. And the funny part is they also had coffees with each other too. And so there's about 6 of us, Sherry's one of them, that we get together on a monthly basis on a Friday afternoon, either at 3 or 3:30, and we meet to have time one to build a friendship because now we actually do things outside of our monthly meeting. But this monthly meeting is where we bring, like, hey, I would love a connection to this person, or does anybody know this person? Or, hey, I have a question about my business, right? So we kind of try to bring together like those like-minded like work activities. But because of it, we have all truly became really good friends and done like Friendsgiving and, just celebrated my birthday together a couple weeks ago. So I really truly believe that if you do networking and you find the right type of people you want to connect with, you can actually build long-term relationships. I would totally agree with you. But it's also in that follow-up. That's the key, I think, is follow-up and consistency of just showing up.
Yes. And time. So Sherry and I have known each other. She was one of the first people I met when I started my business, and we connected over something that was quite, personal and, emotional. Each of us had a parent that was, dealing with some health challenges, and it was just refreshing to be out there, with the weight of the world on my shoulders, trying to figure out how do I establish this business? How do I make it monetizable through my daily activities. And here was Sherry, who, could be a referral source, but more importantly, just became someone that I bonded with over a shared experience. And, we have continued to support one another and think, kindly of each other and make introductions to people that we also have a connection with. It's not just, hey, here's 10 people that you might be able to sell something to. It's,
Right.
hey, here's somebody that I am very, fond of, that, I feel is similar to how you and I are connected. And boom, then there's almost instant trust and connection with that new person. And of course, that's how you and I became connected. So,
Yeah.
it isn't about how much business Sherry and I have done. It's about how many times we've smiled at each other at an event that we attended, how many times we followed up by text or phone call, just to check in, and take a real interest in one another. So, and, Sherry hosts events as well. So, when
Yes.
she's taught pickleball, I was one of the people who came and learned how to play at her events and, built a sense of community there. So,
And
um,
she loves her pickleball, you
she
know?
does. She
She
does.
does.
And now
And
I steer other people towards pickleball, and I share that passion with them, even though I'm not near as good as Sherry is.
yep, I tell her she can go pro at any time probably. But again, pickleball has been a great networking way for her to grow her business as well.
Right.
So
Right.
it
And
doesn't
that's,
it can
go
look
ahead.
so
Sorry.
different. Oh, no, I was just gonna say networking can look like so many different things.
It can. And I'm coming up on 4 years in business. I've been in Indiana now for 14 years. 13, sorry, this summer. And it just takes time. These things don't happen overnight. I've lived next door to some of my neighbors and had instant connections with some, and some it took years, and
Yeah.
others I still don't feel like I barely know. But you learn who you have commonalities with just through we're shoveling our driveways at the same time. It can be miserable, but we could also make a conversation out of it and, come away knowing a little bit more about each other. So that's the same way I approach my business.
Mhm.
There was a time when I was uh, coming back into bowling, and there's a league I'm in with hundreds of people in it, and I did try to promote my business to an extent, and add value. This is something I'm doing for the league. This is something I'm offering, for people who need it. And it didn't really go very far. But then, recently I helped host an event with Southside Mybor that had over 200 people attend through, the fundraising efforts to support Johnson County Senior Services. And I go to my bowling league and someone comes up to me, and he and I have talked a few times about my business. And he goes, I didn't know you knew so and so, So it was like now all of a sudden those two worlds connect. And it's like I did this MyBore event and somebody knew somebody that I also bowl with. And now all of a sudden there's leverage there that wasn't before. It doesn't mean I'm going to go back and pass out flyers and business cards again to everybody, but the word of mouth and the hey, did you know Joe runs this event, or did you know that he's involved with this or that? And I enjoy all of those things. I'd rather spend my time, giving back and helping organize and lead things because that fuels me. Selling insurance is great. I love it. It's something that I would do 24/7 if I had the time and the energy to do that. But that's not true growth. The growth in building a team and, establishing those real connections in the world is more sustainable and human. There's a human element to it.
So from your experience, what's one conversation skill that can instantly elevate somebody's influence?
That's a good question. I think honestly, which is not my strongest point, but listening. I think listening is super important. And we do it in our interpersonal relationships, right? Like a lot of times we listen to respond. We listen so that we know like what our next move is. But purely listening and trying to wrap your head around where the other person is in their journey and their set of needs that they have right now. Um, and then there comes a time when maybe you apply what you know, but you don't have to rush. I think that's something I've really learned over the last few years is that when I don't know what I'm going to do about something, I just wait. And usually the answer comes. And sometimes it comes through another connection that you didn't know you were going to have. There's actually a great example of that. Um, I was at an Aspire event, still pretty new. Their coffee connections can be 80 or more people. And I met someone that I thought, wow, they're really like impressive, but what they do and the unique value that they bring is so specific. I don't know if I'll ever have a need for that. And they happen to be from the Burmese community, been in the United States a long time, owned a couple businesses, involved with the Rotary, all kinds of different things. And I just sort of tucked that away. And it was about a year and a half later, someone from the Perry Meridian School District expressed concern about their redistricting and how it was going to affect everyone. They weren't real happy about it, but they were actually more concerned about the people who had a language barrier and specifically the Burmese families in the community. And I said, well, I know someone who might actually be connected in a way that could help. And I made an introduction, and it turned out that this gentleman was friends with a board member in Perry Meridian that also was from the Burmese community. So just sort of having those connections, you never know what it's going to lead to. Um, but it was instantly able to make that connection, and they said, oh, well now there's someone on the board who's well aware of this concern from the community. Um, and it shortens the distance between the need and the outcome. So
That's such a good example. There are so many clients I've worked with over the last 14 years, a lot in the mortgage, real estate, title, even insurance, financial advisors who get very uncomfortable, but they know they should probably do one-on-one coffees more, meet and talk with more. But there is always the fear of, I don't know if I can give them referrals. I don't know who I can introduce them to, and like they feel it has to be a very, you know, give and take at every coffee meeting, right? And so I think you've made this point a couple times, which I hope everybody takes away is it's time, right? Like if you can help them right away or introduce them to somebody, great. But if not, be consistent and keep meeting with them on a good cadence because you never know how you can help each other down the road. And I love your story that you just mentioned about, this person who's somebody who was on the school board. You never know who people know outside the work realm, right? So I just think it's important that no matter what industry you're in, those one-on-one coffees are actually really important.
they are, and we're all different. So there are some folks that like being very, I don't want to use this in a negative way, but being very transactional or calculated or timely is important to them. They will naturally, the more that they go out and meet people, they will gravitate towards other folks who have the same set of values and interests. And they can become more efficient by investing that time. And the power of more than just yourself promoting your business and advocating for the type of person you are and the integrity that you have is very powerful. It takes time to build that up. But what I've observed being still pretty new in my business is that there are some folks who just they grind it out for 4 years, 5 years, and then they turn around and it's like, I've never done this. I actually have someone that I've kind of, it took me a couple of years to sort of engage them in some networking activities, and they've been in business for over 10 and just didn't know really what they were missing. And that's okay. Everyone's going to go about it their own way. It's just when you do it, have a score sheet for yourself. It could be mental, it could be something you write down, but what am I hoping to gain today? And then jot down or recall after you leave, did I achieve what I set out to? And were there any nice surprises or unexpected gains from this? And I wish I had done something like that where I could look back and see how many different things, happened unexpectedly. But I can definitely say more than once I've gone somewhere begrudgingly, like I'm tired, I have too many things to do, but I said I was going to be here. Sherry's expecting me or Becca's expecting me, whatever it is. And you show up and you do the thing and you come away with one thing you wouldn't have known if you weren't there. It might be, oh, so and so transitioned from this company to this company, or they went on their own now, or something that is a key detail that you're happy to sort of be in on now that you weren't before.
Yeah. So in your world, relationships are everything, right? What's one thing people think builds trust, but it actually doesn't?
I think referrals are, and I don't have an answer, planned for this, but I think referrals in and of themselves, saying, hey, so and so can help you with that. It doesn't necessarily build trust, but the way that you do it can really make a difference. So, telling your client or a friend or family member, listen, I have someone in mind that I think could help you. Is that something you'd be open to? What would you prefer, an email or a text? I'm going to send a group message. I'm going to introduce the two of you. This is something I do a lot. It might feel a little awkward if it's not something you've done before, but this person will respond, and then follow up with you and just make sure you give them some time. And I actually just presented in my networking group this morning about the difference of having 5 minutes to present to someone versus having an hour, right? Because people want to complain about the level of service that they've gotten, but if they don't actually get service,
Mm,
right? If all you get is a quote and it took
yep,
five minutes to explain this is how I arrived at that price, one, they're not going to remember. They're not getting an experience that's referable, right?
yep,
And they don't necessarily trust you because someone else said, hey, Joe can give you a quote, right? Or so and so can cut your hair.
yeah,
That's a little bit different, right? Because sitting in a chair getting a haircut could take 5 minutes if you're a guy, it could take 3 hours if you're a woman,
yep,
or anywhere
absolutely.
in between. Um, and I've been to places where I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want my hair washed today, but if I don't allow that person to take me through their process and offer me, this is something that we do here that I am particularly skilled at, I don't know the difference. I can go to 10 places, get the same service, and feel like it was fine, you know? Same thing you think about restaurants, right? How many times have you had a burger? How many burgers have you had that were memorable, right? And
Yep,
then if you really take into account, what was it? Was it the attentiveness of the server? Was it the ice in the water? Was the kind of ice cubes you like? I mean, it might not have actually just been the burger.
right.
So,
Yep.
so that referable experience, it deserves a proper setup, I think, is another way to look at it.
And so often there is not a great setup. And it's something I have really, try to hone in years ago was a really great way for people to introduce me either via email or text message because that introduction, it's everything. It's key for everything. So not only giving and receiving referrals, yes, great, fabulous, but if there's no, you know, key up introduction, you're right, it just kind of falls flat. Doesn't go anywhere. It almost maybe feels even icky for some people, right?
Yeah. Well, in context, it takes a minute to write a 3 paragraph intro in an email, but oftentimes if I don't have a chance to get on the phone with both parties and I'm making especially like a business networking type intro, you kind of want to talk that person up. Hey, this is so and so. They're on the board for these organizations and they also do this. This is so and so, this is what they're looking for, this is how you can help them. It just gives them context. And having context, I've presented insurance to someone that I did not know was the referring party's child, right? um just got on the phone, did my process, didn't ask a lot of background. Oh, how do you know so and so? Presented everything, and then went back to the referring party and said, here's what happened. And they said, oh, well, I'll talk to her. It's my daughter. And I'm like, I wish I would have known that beforehand. It just, that kind of thing can be really helpful. You don't want to abuse it or, be like, oh, tell me, what it's like having so and so for your parent. Like, that's not relevant. But, you know, oh, I really respect so and so because, they do great things in their line of work. And, I understand that that's your parent or you're their child, you don't have to ask for all the dirty details, but at least acknowledging it and, having that frame of mind while you're going through your process can be really helpful.
Absolutely. In our Southwestern consulting world, what you were just describing, we actually call that pre-approach, and it's basically the first step of the sales cycle, right? The sales process is when you get that referral, what are the golden nuggets? Like, how do you know them? What do you respect about them? What do you admire most about them? How do outside of how do you know them? Like, tell me a funny story, right? Something that, you know, you can help relate with them, and then, like, the best way to reach out to them, right? Like, those golden nuggets, that pre-approach, super crucial when also introducing them too. Because
Yes.
I've also had, "Oh, this is my dad." Had no clue, um, and, um, and I should have asked you know, and got a little more clarity, but yeah, it's happened before. I would now when I get my pre-approach, I really kinda dig in and make sure I've got some good context too. Makes a
Yes,
big
for
difference.
sure.
So, okay, I have a couple fun questions for you here.
All right.
So, Joe, if somebody read your resume or looked at your LinkedIn and they'd see all your success that you've had over the years, what's the part of your journey that doesn't or wouldn't appear on paper?
I think how everything is connected. And, I've had a lot of different positions. I've moved around a bit. Sometimes it was because my wife had a job opportunity. And so I did, other things to fill in that time. At one point, when our kids were little and she was getting started at IUPUI, now IU Indianapolis, I stayed home for a couple months. I worked at a car dealership that was nearby so that if they got hurt at daycare, I was right there, and then I worked overnights at UPS during that time as well. So there's a lot of, drive and hard work behind all of those things and being conversational and, ambitious at the same time. I think led me to where everything finally came together. I have restaurant and retail management experience. I have classroom experience with elementary age kids, a lot of different volunteering things. So, through all of that is representative of who I am at my core. It's not just the function that I fulfilled for those jobs. It's how I showed up every day until I realized I wanted to show up and have, sort of full authority of what I do with my time and how I engage with people. Um, so I learned a lot along the way, and I think I was always in pursuit of a bigger impact, of doing more um, than just what the 9 to 5 allowed. Um, and so it all does tie together. It might look a little bit sorted on paper, but ultimately that's the backstory, is that I've always strived to do, and fulfill what I'm capable of doing and fulfilling in the community and in people's individual lives as an insurance agent. And what I really enjoy from all of that is bringing those experiences to the meetings that I host and helping other business owners, diversify, because I have a very diverse, ironically, I was voted most versatile in my class. Um, but, helping other people see that it doesn't have to be all that complicated. Just go and do it and learn as you go and be humble and authentic and make connections with people, that move you forward.
I love that. So that leads very nicely into my last question that I always ask everybody, Joe, which is if you had to boil it down, what are the top three pieces of advice that you would give to anyone looking to either grow their business or grow their leadership skills?
Yeah, I think one is to talk to people who are already doing what you want to do, right? Showing up at an Aspire meeting and being surrounded by successful people who do exactly what you do or work for large organizations that, make your, role in the meeting or the event feel, somewhat on the smaller side, learn about their stories. So that would be one, right? Learn from the people who are already doing the things that appeal to you. The second thing would be, to when you time block or you prioritize what you're doing, push yourself to do the things that you're not comfortable with. So even if it's 10% of your calendar, put those things on there to do them. That could be, looking at the books of your business, that could be networking. It just depends on what your strengths are and what your room for growth is. And then I think the third thing is give yourself some grace. Be kind to yourself. Think about, the things that you're doing and that you maybe feel you're lacking at as part of the journey, because where you are now, if you continue forward and you look back, is going to feel entirely different. And you'll be glad that you did it.
I love that. Three great pieces of advice. I love those. Um, I was just actually talking with a client real quickly today about um, some pain, some things that he's been doing, but it's helping grow his business. And so he's actually it's part of that prospecting piece. So for a lot of people, prospecting is that 10%, right?
Hmm.
But you got to do it to grow business if you're especially if you're in sales. So, but anyways,
We're all
Joe,
in sales.
we yeah, and people don't
Everybody's
realize
in
that.
sales. Yeah,
Even as parents, we're in sales, especially, having
right.
kids, you're in sales because we've got to get,
And
have a great
if you're not, the moment that your kid sells you, you realize that you need to be in sales as well.
exactly. That or you need a sales coach to help you with your kids. So,
Right, right.
uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not a bad thing,
No.
sales, like that was my thing in car sales, was like I want to be the unexpected experience. It doesn't have to
Yeah,
be pitchy, it doesn't have to be
yeah,
forceful. But you have to advocate for yourself in this world all the time, and that's
all the time.
selling at its core.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I am so glad you are able to hop on and, um, you know, you have such a wealth of knowledge, especially in the networking realm. So I appreciate you being on today.
Yeah, I appreciate you and look forward to, continuing to follow your broadcasts. And I appreciate you having me on as well.
Absolutely. Everybody, this wraps up another insightful episode of Talk with Coach. A huge thank you to Joe for sharing his valuable knowledge and lessons on from his incredible journey. And hopefully, you took at least one or two things to help you grow your business today. If this episode today resonated with you, or if you've got a burning question or topic that you'd like for us to cover in the future, I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Until next time, remember every step forward is a part of your success story. Keep striving for greatness, keep learning, and don't forget your journey is just beginning. Have a great day.